There's a new spin on casual dining near Drake University. Lucky Horse Beer and Burgers. Craveable faves, flatbreads, delicious burgers, frozen cocktails, and a crazy cool vibe. Get to Lucky Horse Beer and Burgers today.
The morning news on YourIowa.com is brought to you by the Commission on U.S. Territories, striving for equal representation around the globe, and by Keep Iowa First, committed to keeping the Iowa caucuses the first in the nation contest in selecting the presidency of the United States. And now, here's your host, Brent Roske.
Good morning, everyone. It is a chilly Friday here in Iowa. We're going to be in single digits all this week. We've got a huge show today. Coming up in just a second here, we have the State Auditor of the state of Iowa here. Rob Sand is kind enough to be with us this morning, talk about the office of the State Auditor and how it works for Iowans. After Mr. Sand, we're going to have on this gentleman, Saul Lieberman, with the Institute for Political Innovation, talking about that book, The Politics Industry, and different ways we can improve our system of government. Folks, we are doing our part to honor Black History Month. And so next week, got some great guests. My friend Steven Adams produced this movie, Rodney King, on Netflix. He also did the Huey P. Newton story on Netflix, both directed by Spike Lee. Steven Adams is going to be with us next week. On Monday, Deborah Willis, there she is. She's going to be with us. This is her brand new book, The Black Civil War Soldier. She is actually on the staff along with Sam Pollard, who, if you haven't seen the interview we did with him, Oscar nominee Sam Pollard, his documentary is out right now, MLK FBI, an amazing work that he has out as well. But Miss Willis is going to be with us on Monday talking about this incredible book of photographs and history about Black Civil War soldiers. Also, we're going to have on this gentleman. Now, this is State Representative Ross Wilburn. He was just elected to be the chair of the IDP. He was also former mayor of Iowa City, but he was also with the Kamala Harris campaign. Now, here's a bit of history that just happened. It was just reported just an hour ago, CNN, everyone's picked it up, that the vice president, Kamala Harris, has now cast her first tie-breaking vote in the Senate. Now, just a little bit of history. Theodore Roosevelt, LBJ, Gerald Ford, Dan Quayle, and even Joe Biden, when they were vice presidents, they never cast a tie-breaking vote. Well, here we go. The Senate has now passed a budget resolution early Friday morning, and this is a procedural step that would open up for President Biden's COVID-19 relief package. Now, that doesn't mean that it's passed yet. This is just a procedural vote to get it going, and the measure passed 51-50 with Vice President Kamala Harris breaking the tie. What this means is that it will now go back to the House to get revoted on possibly today. President Biden has said he's willing to go forward without the support of Republicans if need be, but he stressed he's willing to make concessions if it will earn bipartisan support. So Mr. Wilburn, Representative Wilburn, will be on the show next week. Also, Dr. Franz Whitfield will be on honoring Black History Month. He was our guest on Martin Luther King Day. Always grateful to have Dr. Whitfield on the program. And this I'm just so excited about. So there's Bonnie Louise Brown. Born and raised in Iowa, graduated Drake. She's a social worker here. She's an activist. That is pictures of her with her family this week in West Africa. She's there visiting family. We're trying to figure out, we've been emailing, doing an uplink literally from Africa, from her family's home. And she's going to talk about that statue right there. Some great history. It's just fascinating. I'm so excited to have on Miss Brown all the way from Africa. But without any delay, here is our first guest this morning, State Auditor Rob Sand. Thanks so much for being with us today, sir.
You bet. Thanks for having me, Brent. You're going to have quite a show. The Political Innovation Institute, those folks are doing good work.
They sure are, and very grateful to Saul Lieberman for, we actually taped his interview a couple days ago, but yeah, I agree. Anytime we can come up with ways to make government work better for people, I'm a huge fan of. And it just to use that as a transition, it seems like you've made the auditor's office a bit more than maybe even the founders of the state had in mind. You've really kind of taken it upon yourself to get involved, to kind of use the office in ways that helps Iowans. I wonder if you can kind of walk people through that, and then we'll go into some specifics.
Sure, absolutely. When I ran in 2018, the motto for my campaign was "Wake Up the Watchdog." And it was based in the idea that the office, historically, at least in recent history, hadn't been doing everything that it could be doing for Iowans. I knew this because I had actually sat down and done a lot of homework. I had read through Chapter 11 of the Iowa Code. I had read it 3 times because there are parts of it that are super dense. But that is the job description for state auditor. That's what the office does. That's what gives it its powers. That's what gives it its limitations. And by sitting down and actually reading through that, I learned that this office could be doing a lot more for the state than what it had been doing. Now, I had been at the Attorney General's office. I had been working on public corruption cases. I knew a lot of the people at the auditor's office because we worked together on some of those public corruption cases. But I had sort of hit the point after I was at the Attorney General's office for 7 years. I had hit a certain point where I was tired of getting up every day and just bathing myself at work in the worst things that people can do to each other. That's the reality of criminal prosecution. And so when I spent some time reading through Chapter 11 and saw that there was really an ability to wake up this watchdog and get it to do more for Iowans, that to me was just a really positive opportunity. Here I was getting up every day, doing work that I really cared about, but that at the end of the day wasn't a good mesh for me as a person. I tend to be a little bit more of an optimist. And so to see an office, the state auditor's office, that could be doing more and see an opportunity to have it do more just by using the powers that it already had, that was a really exciting opportunity for me. And that's exactly what we're doing. You're exactly right.
I've been receiving the releases, the different statements that the office has been sending out. I received this just a couple days ago here. Auditor Sand's statement on school reform proposal. It says Iowans should be alarmed that the proposal for vouchers contains no independent audit provision. And I want to know if you could explain that a little bit, how that, how the auditor's office would get involved in, say, something like school vouchers and what your statement really means.
Absolutely. Every school district in the state of Iowa gets an audit every year. Some of them are done by the auditor's office. Others are done by private CPA firms. And I want to contrast that statement in whole. The latter part notes that this giant education reform omnibus bill, there's a second piece of it for charter schools. And the charter schools would be held to the same rigorous standards for oversight as Iowa's current public schools are. But the vouchers provision wouldn't. And anyone that's concerned about how their tax dollars are getting spent, I think should care about that. The only entity that bill gives any power at all to audit is the Department of Education. And most importantly, it doesn't require it. It just says they can do it if they want to. What does that tell you? How much oversight are we going to see then if it doesn't have to be done and the only entity doing it is actually not an independent entity? That's just not good public policy.
It's interesting. I had a former state rep, Karen Derry, on just a couple of days ago talking about the school vouchers. And I don't know where where the line is drawn with the auditor's office, what you can and can't comment on. But the voucher system, to me, it seems as simple as taking money that would have gone to public schools and now putting it to private schools. But I guess my question is, and it's alluded to in your statement there, is that, does that mean that literally anybody in the state could just say, well, now we're a school and put a sign up and collect that money? Or what sort of oversight is there?
I haven't read that much into the entire bill. I couldn't tell you if anybody could just put up a sign and say we're a school now. In my work here, what I've done is I've dug into the provisions about the audits. And that's the piece of it that I think is most important to the work that the auditor's office does. I can tell you in general, the states that have vouchers for public schools are those that are among the worst public school systems in the country. I don't think we want to be taking ideas for educational reform from the states that are doing the worst. That just doesn't make sense to me as an Iowan. If we're looking around for ideas for ways to improve our public schools, that doesn't seem to be it. Also, defunding public schools is what this comes down to at the end of the day. They're just taking money away from public schools. I don't think that helps solve any problems either.
Now, with all the different issues facing Iowans and facing state government, how does your office go about deciding? Okay, this is an area we're going to pursue. This is something we're not going to put staff toward. How do you make those decisions?
That is a great question, especially in a pandemic, because as you're well aware, we have gobs of money getting spent at the state level and from the federal level, and all kinds of programs that are happening that don't normally happen. And all of it needs oversight. There's literally no more important time for oversight than in the middle of a pandemic. One thing that we have been doing is working with a group, with is maybe a strong word, but a group of state auditors, Democrats, Republicans, about half and half from all around the country have said, hey, we should conduct audits of our state's testing data and treatment data. And so we're all conducting it within our own states, the same audits, asking the same questions. And one of the reasons we're doing that is because there's value added to that, not just to our state, but to the whole country. So we decided to do that because if we're conducting that review here in Iowa, and we're doing that within our office, and around the country, a lot of other states are doing the same thing, we're eventually all going to be able to issue reports so then you can compare to each other. You know, we're supposed to be the laboratory of democracy in the United States, where you have 50 different laboratories doing different experiments to figure out what works. And what's really great about being a part of that and choosing that as one of the places for us to put our time and energy is when we're done, thanks to the work that other state auditors are doing as well, hopefully the whole country can learn something about good practices and bad practices. Generally speaking, though, outside of that, it's tough. Almost every state agency we audit every year. The issues that we look into are the ones that don't smell right. That's an easy way to put it. Now, if it comes to a local entity, usually we have to have some degree of a relationship with the entity, or legally speaking, we have to have one of a series of sort of checkpoints met in order for us to go in, which would include an official request from an employee or an elected official, that sort of thing.
Iowa State Auditor Rob Sand, thank you so much for being with us live this morning.
You bet. Happy to be here. Thanks, Brent.
Folks, we're going to play a quick PSA I directed with the cast of The West Wing for Justice for Vets, and then right back with Saul Lieberman and the Institute for Political Innovation. We'll be right back.
A decade of war has taken an unprecedented toll on our men and women in uniform.
Most veterans return to our communities as leaders, but everyone's journey home is not the same.
Hundreds of thousands of our veterans are suffering from the trauma of war.
Without assistance, the downward spiral can be quick and destructive.
It doesn't have to be this way.
At Justice for Vets, we believe that every veteran should have the opportunity for treatment and restoration.
Justice for Vets is the only national organization dedicated to the expansion of veterans' treatment courts.
Veterans treatment courts hold our veterans accountable for their actions.
By providing structure, treatment, and mentoring, these courts help our veterans and their families get their lives back on track.
And veterans treatment courts work.
We ask much of our men and women in uniform, and they ask little in return. It is our collective duty to come to their aid when they struggle on the home front. This not only honors their sacrifice, but makes our communities stronger.
A donation to Justice for Vets helps put a veterans treatment court within reach of every veteran in need.
A donation to Justice for Vets keeps veterans and treatment where they belong.
A donation to Justice for Vets shows your commitment to leaving no veteran behind.
A donation to Justice for Vets will help save lives, restore families, and rebuild communities.
Get involved and go to justiceforvets.org.
Veterans fought for our freedom. Now it's our turn to fight for theirs. Thank you.
Welcome back to the program. I'm always happy and excited to talk about American politics, and more specifically on how to improve the American political process. That's why I got involved in it roughly 10 years ago, started getting involved in politics. So I'm happy to have on Saul Lieberman. He's the executive director for the Institute for Political Innovation. Saul, thanks for being with us on the show today.
Yeah, good to be here with you.
So I first learned about you and the work you do from this book. We're going to show a graphic here. Yep. But the politics industry, how political innovation can break partisan gridlock and save our democracy. And I'm going to read one short passage here, and then we'll jump into it. talking about politics in general, it says what should be a problem-solving, outcomes-driven cycle of elections and legislative leadership is instead an industrial-strength perversion that fosters unhealthy competition and blocks the innovation and progress for which American democracy is known. And here's the phrase that just jumped out at me. Politics has become the preeminent barrier to addressing the very problems it exists to solve. So just a bold statement there, basically saying politics is the problem. What are your thoughts, Saul? Where do we start with this conversation?
Yeah, well, the book is a great place to start, and I'm glad to see you read from it. I recommend everybody, if they can, take the time or find more ways into it, because politics industry theory offers us a kind of a new way at approaching our problems broadly, and through this idea of industry competition thinking and seeing it as a design question, right? So there are some myths around the nature of our political system, how it works, and some things we just sort of accept that we probably shouldn't. You know, one of the things Catherine, the lead author of the book and then the founder of our institute, says a lot is there's a story about these two fish swimming along, and an old fish goes by and says, "Hey boys, how's the water?" The two fish keep going, they look at each other and they say, "What the heck is water?" We just sort of accept the system around us as though it's just the water that we swim in as fish in an ocean, and let us allow ourselves to look at it anew. And what we've got with the book is this industry competition lens, and it did this for me. I hope it's done it for you and for many others, is if you start to look at politics as an industry like you would food and beverage or footwear, you start to see that it is based on this, we accept unhealthy competition, right? And then the free marketplace is a partner to our success in America. That what makes America what it is in a lot of ways. We don't have a free marketplace in politics. We have a duopoly, we have two parties, and all the rules and practices and norms, most of which aren't written in the Constitution, have been designed and optimized for generations to do really one main thing: to keep them in power and keep other people out. So if you're Nike or Reebok, or what's another shoe brand? I'm getting old. New Balance, whatever it might be, you have to be aware of what you're doing or not doing for the customers. You have to be aware of the channels in the shoe stores or things where your product is. Because if you're not serving what that customer is looking for, guess what? Allbirds is coming at you online, and they're going to have a new product that's sustainable, delivered in a different way. So that's the core of it, is we need to have healthy competition in our politics, just like we do in every other great industry in the United States.
And the book mentions some of that, but the unfair competition, I mean, down to ballot access, people don't realize, who are the people that can even run for office in this country? There's so many hurdles to even participate.
Yeah. Oh my God, innumerable. I mean, one of the ones we talk about is often, follow the money. Like if you're a journalist or in media, that's like the religion often of a newsroom. If you are a Republican candidate or a Democratic candidate, or on the other side, if you're a donor, if you're a Republican Party, a Democrat Party, there are limits that are set for what you can give. And those, it wouldn't shock you, are several hundred times more. You can give much more to a Republican or Democrat than you can to an independent. So if you're an independent candidate, you cannot get fundraising and support to the degree you can if you're a Republican or Democrat. What a barrier, and what a barrier of entry. A classic, one of the five forces in industry competition thinking. So there are a lot of these. And, so the key thing that we have to do is, with politics industry theory and looking at it with this lens, you're going to uncover all sorts of stuff that's going to set your hair on fire. But what can we do about it? What is the most powerful and achievable approach to getting a system that produces results? And that comes back to the core of our work, is really deciding what we're going to spend our time on, because it can most quickly lead to the America we'd all want to be able to give to our kids and our grandkids.
I read a quote several years ago that was attributed to Ronald Reagan. He said, the first rule of the bureaucracy is to uphold the bureaucracy. Yeah. Their job one is to keep the job. Are these changes that are so eloquently talked about in the book here, The Politics Industry? I mean, not only having a good idea is different than getting buy-in in Congress or whoever to say, yeah, let's change for the betterment of the people, when it seems so often they're only concerned about the betterment of themselves.
Yeah, that's a great point, because the effective prescription, the primary prescription of this book is, if you track all this dysfunction back to what puts a person in office? A primary election, right? In most states, and then a general election. What is that doing to create this really perverted incentive structure so that how this works in Washington today is doing your job the way we need you and want you to do it does not overlap or intersect with getting reelected. It often, there's a chapter in the book, a section in the book about immigration where the parties actually choose not to solve it, because solving it would change the calculus around whether they're getting elected. Or if they do solve it and they're cross-partisan and they work together across the aisle, they're probably going to get primaried for doing so. So it creates this really backward incentive structure. And again, back to industry thinking, back to the footwear industry or whatever you want to call it, people are rational actors. Politicians are rational actors. They're responding to incentives. So change the incentives in party primaries and general elections, how they work, and then you'll have politicians who are actually empowered to solve problems because they can map that to their ability to get reelected. It is the opposite right now. So, again, that's really what we're pushing toward. And are they going to buy into that? That's the key to your question, right? Is per the Reagan quote, they want to protect their job, protect their bureaucracy, whatever. So it is in some ways for some a shot across the bow about, where they are entrenched. But we're seeing a lot of progress. We just passed Final Four voting, which is a sibling of our prescription for change, Final Five voting in Alaska, thanks to a wonderful management team. So now in Alaska, we're going to have open primaries and ranked choice voting coming up soon. And what you're already seeing in somebody like Senator Lisa Murkowski is she is now empowered to think about problem solving and being bipartisan in a way she wasn't before, because she doesn't have to worry about losing in a primary election next time around in Alaska. So it immediately changes the calculus.
And I want you to explain that really quick. I participated as a candidate in what was called the jungle primary in California, but explain to folks what that is, just because it is. It's revolutionary, but at the same time, it's so obvious. I can't believe it hasn't been the case forever.
Yeah, again, it's the water we've all been swimming in, and we get to a place where we're so apathetic about the elections. Why should we even care about, we can change them and they can be better. So right now what we have across almost all the country, we have closed party primaries, right? We have to pick your ballot, Republican or Democrat, right? And then vote in it. And then one person, will get through to a general where you're going to have the duopoly almost always equally represented, a Republican against a Democrat. So what does that guarantee? It guarantees that one member of the duopoly is always going to sail through. And then, they have that power base. That duopoly is solid and set. So by changing to open primaries, and the key is also that you have upwards of 5 people getting through that primary, it changes that calculus. So now all of a sudden the primary election isn't a place where a small sliver of the electorates, often special interests and extremists, they often decide who is going to win the election. So backing up for a sec, primaries have very low turnout. And as I said, they're dominated by special interests and extremists. And I think there's a recent study that shows I think it's 80% or plus of general elections, the winner was basically decided in the primary. So general election doesn't matter. So flip that around, make the general election matter, make that be a discussion of ideas that isn't already determined by a small group of people, and then deploy ranked choice voting through instant runoff in the general election, which will ensure that the plurality voting system doesn't, again, take control. So basically, we have a first past the post, winner take all system in general. So if you and I are, and one other person is voting, is running on the ballot, we only need like 34% or more to win, right? So that would mean 65% didn't vote for us. So what ranked choice does is ensure you have somebody that better represents, the will of that electorate. So it's taking away these gatekeepers, these special interests that control the primary and make the general election not matter, and then make the general election about ideas and then accountability. Because if I win, right, next time around, I'm going to care about who voted for you first or second or third, because those votes may or may not come to me depending on how I perform. So then it creates this layer of accountability. So
one other thing that people, when they dig into it, they realize how hesitate to use the word corrupt, but gerrymandering and tweaking districts. Iowa has really got a good example. The state's a rectangle, and pretty much the congressional district is a straight division. It's 25%. It literally they drew a cross in the middle. And what the result of that is, for instance, our second district election just got decided by less than 10 votes. It was one of the closest federal elections in the country in history. When I was a candidate in California, I'll never forget the district. One part of it stuck out this little strip and then went up along, and you're like, how in the world? And they're trying to figure out, literally going house to house. Well, they got so many Democrats here, so many Republicans here. If we draw the line here, well, then I'm only running for this batch of people. So there's so many different ways, and the book goes through it on how the industry has figured out, barrier to entry and how to make sure the people that are there stay there.
Yeah. And again, this comes back also to powerful and achievable because, I worked on redistricting and gerrymandering stuff here in Illinois. I beat my head against the wall there. Now with the census, we're 10 years out. The question, there's I think a very valid question. What can we do in the interim period here? And thanks to Article 1 of the Constitution, states have control of their elections. They can redesign them. That's what happened in Alaska, thanks to ballot initiative. Hopefully we'll have more ballot initiatives coming up very soon in states across the country, as well as legislative campaigns. So what's powerful and what's achievable? Final five voting, the reason we lean toward that rather than campaign finance or gerrymandering, aside for the fact that it really affects that incentive structure in a very powerful way, we can do it. That we have the means for it through direct democracy, through legislative routes, thanks to the Constitution. So let's do something that we can do and also something worth doing at the same time.
So the Institute for Political Innovation, tell us about the Institute. Why was it started? Who started it? And what is the work that you folks do?
Right. So Catherine is the founder and chair. I am the executive director. We're building out our team even more over the months to come. Our mandate initially was to, Catherine's book was coming out last year. We wanted to be able to put some body around what to do with that book, so it just didn't find its way into conversations and not produce action. So we wanted to make sure we could capture some of that interest and demand and help people that wanted to lead a campaign in their state and give them some guidance, give them a blueprint, and then down the road other types of support as it's needed. So that was the motivation for it. And also as an institute, there's more work to be done, more research and scholarship on politics industry theory, on Final Five voting. If and when it succeeds, people are going to look for us. Like, how do you implement it well? How do you evaluate that it's working? We want to make sure we can keep that moving. And what we found is there is so much demand as a product of this book and effort. And I will say, after January 6th, I think there was before January 6th and after January 6th, and we're all sort of reeling from it. The amount of people who we were having sort of soft conversations with who are now coming saying, enough, this is too much. We need to figure out a system that is deliberative and balanced, and that we can, have a democracy that we believe we should in 2021. So we're really excited about what the Institute can do to serve that demand and start some new campaigns across the country.
And you mentioned before and after January 6th. Does that go toward, it seemed like just a year ago, just a few months ago, that things were really intractable, that both sides were really entrenched and things were immovable. Do you feel a sense of hope that people are looking toward improving this big megalith called American politics?
I definitely feel it outside of DC. And, people like you surfacing this conversation, like, I don't know that we've been talking about politics for 10 minutes and we haven't really dived into Trumpism or the left Democrats, and that's a very refreshing thing to be doing. So there are people who are starting to look at it at the system level and wondering, what do we really need to be doing here? Because it's more than candidates, it's more than party. And they're starting to put their money and their agency and their network into it, which again makes the work of the Institute that much more powerful.
Well done, sir. I applaud your work from here. I've been sharing the book with folks I know. So well done to you. Well done to the industry and to the authors, Catherine, Michael Porter. And the Institute for Political Innovation is at political-innovation.org if you want to go check it out. Saul, thanks for so much for being with us today.
Good to be here. Thanks for talking about this important issue.
Folks, we're going to take a quick break and then we'll be back with more of the program. Don't go anywhere.
Washington is broken. Over the years, it's the only political statement Americans agree on. Worse yet, we've come to accept it as fact. Newsflash, Washington is not broken. It's doing what it's designed to do. It's polarized. It's gridlocked. It's lost. The solution to revitalizing our democracy by reinstating healthy competition and ensuring accountability of elected officials lies in a combination of top 5 primaries and ranked choice voting. This system of top 5 primaries and ranked choice voting yields several benefits. For starters, it reduces partisanship. Candidates must appeal to the majority of voters in order to be elected. Ranking candidates in order of preference gives people the opportunity to vote for their favorite candidate without fear of helping their least favorite candidate get elected or feeling pressured to vote for the lesser of 2 evils. It's been shown to reward candidates who run more positive campaigns rather than ones who malign other candidates because it's important to be people's second, third, and fourth choices too. Here's how it works. With top 5 primaries, all candidates are listed on the same primary ballot. The top 5 vote getters, regardless of their partisan affiliations, advance to the general election. The general election is where ranked choice voting comes into play. The 5 candidates who won the primary election are listed on a general election ballot. Voters can then rank each of those 5 candidates in order of preference. The candidate who achieves the majority of votes, over 50%, is the winner. Unlike our current system where candidates can win the election without having the majority of the votes, if no one gets a majority, the candidate with the fewest votes is eliminated. Voters who selected that candidate as their first choice now have their second choice counted. This process of elimination and counting the next best candidate continues until one person achieves more than 50% of the total votes, resulting in the candidate with the broadest appeal winning the election. With top 5 primaries and ranked choice voting, every vote counts and every voice is heard.
Boy, today, huh? What a great show. It's all about democracy, folks. All about improving democracy. And huge thanks to State Auditor Rob Sand, to Saul Lieberman with the Institute for Political Innovation. And folks, it literally is political innovation. We have to solve this. We have to improve what's going on. Wanted to pull up this photo. Drew Yoder, Iowa Through the Lens, Beauty in the Storm. Let's all do our part to find beauty in the storm. This week, it's only going to be single digits here in the Midwest in Iowa. So do your best to find the happy things in life. And if this show can help at all, please send me an email, roske@youriowa.com. Let me know how I'm doing, what you'd like to see, and what changes we could make. But just a beautiful photo there from Drew. And thanks to him for letting me show it to you on this program. Folks, you made it. It's Friday. It's another week. Celebrate the small things. Celebrate your friends, your family. Reach out, connect, and know that at least you know that I am thinking the best for you. All my best wishes for you and yours to have a lovely weekend. We'll see you right back here Monday with Deborah Willis and her brand new book. We'll see you then.